Anwen hadn't meant to fall asleep, but having stayed awake for longer than she was used to, she couldn't resist the pull of tired eyelids. Slumped over with one arm twisted underneath her, she slept the sleep of the exhausted. She found herself inside an immense chamber of stone. The vast cavern was carved in an ornate fashion, with pillars helping to support the high ceiling. The whole expanse appeared to be some kind of gallery. Marble and quartz shone in the chamber. A giant pulsating crystal sat in the middle of the room, casting the half-light. The crystal was multifaceted and radiated several different colors. It felt as though the stone was alive, with each color branching out in a different direction. The formation reminded her of the sugar rock candy she'd once had as a child, only instead of being in one upward direction, it reached out all around, and deep within the center of that glowing mass, an even brighter point signified the heart. It was a rich ruby red in color, and seemed liquid behind the many facets of the outer crystals around it. The rest of the rock seemed dim and transparent in comparison. Anwen walked around the giant collection of crystal spikes. She couldn't help but take in the absolute size of the living rock. One section in particular caught her eye. It was deep blue, graduating to varying shades of the same hue. Beneath her shirt the key glowed, pulsing in time with the heart of the stone.
That which the Master giveth,
she heard in her mind. It sounded like a chorus of ancient voices.
Let us give in return.
Dragons of all kinds filled the empty spaces of the gallery. Their silent forms surrounded the glowing mass. They seemed to hum deep from within their bellies as 3 dragons moved closer to the crystal. One was white, the other 2 were silver, one with blue undertones and the other with green. She instantly recognized the 3 dragons. The green and silver dragon had flown her to the peak of the mountain where she'd met the white one, the Nurrim. The silver with blue dragon had saved her life when she'd fallen off the mountain. She somehow knew that one was Tyler. Nearby, a bronze dragon heated metal in a large stone basin. 2 men beat at the cooling metal with hammer and mallets. They didn't so much as flinch at the intense heat of the dragon flames next to them. Their actions led Anwen to believe they were dragons in human guise. As she watched the events unfold, Tyler transformed into the form she knew so well. Light complexion, light hair, blue eyes that were bluer than the waters of Lake Wyvern. He stepped past her as if she didn't exist. Then he reached up to grasp a segment of crystal that was deep blue throughout. With extreme care, he broke the fragment free from the main cluster. Almost reverently, he carried it over to the 2 blacksmiths. A shower of sparks filled the air as they took the shard and hammered away. The other dragon breathed out white flame, engulfing them so they were lost in view. But the flames finally stopped, and Anwen could see again. She saw Tyler wielding a familiar crystal sword. As he carried it towards Kern, the blade shrank until all that remained was the key. It was an exact replica of the one around her neck. Anwen turned, and the image faded. It was replaced with one of smaller chambers where 12 were seated. 2 mortals and 10 dragons. They were sitting around a circular table, similar to the shrine in the sacred grove. Of the 2 mortals, one was a woman. She recognized Matthias, even though he was much younger than in her previous dreams. She did not recognize the woman. Once more, Kern and Tyler, with the other silver dragon, presided over the meeting. Kern sat with 1 silver dragon on either side of his massive body. Among the other dragons sat an aged yellow, a light brown, a bronze, and a blue. The others were harder to discern in the low light. Kern thumped his tail for order as the brown, bronze, and blue dragons squabbled.
Let the Kaida speak.
The Nurrim's voice filled the chamber, silencing the cries of the other dragons. The woman Anwen had noticed stood from her cushioned seat. She appeared to be younger than Margot. Anwen guessed her to be in her 20s or 30s, but wasn't sure. All she knew was that this woman they'd named Kaida was older than her. The Kaida looked around the room with grave eyes.
My kinsmen, I bring unsettling news. It would seem there are among those of the mage line who wish to challenge dragonkind. They are still small and few in number, but growing.
A murmur rolled through the chamber as those assembled contemplated the news. Kern looked troubled, as did Tyler. They exchanged words that Anwen couldn't hear. Aria Kaida waited for the dragons to settle once more. She knew what she had to say next would be even more upsetting.
It has also come to my attention that some have even attempted to summon revenants. I have learned this move is an attempt to form an alliance with them. They mean to overthrow those dragons who refuse to become subservient to their whims.
Impossible. Nonsense.
The chamber filled with cries of outrage. Deep growls and roars rumbled through the air to such a point that Anwen had to cover her ears. She went to her knees and closed her eyes, willing the madness to stop, and after a few more moments, it did. When Anwen opened her eyes once more, she found herself back in the forest of the sacred land. Her arm had fallen asleep from being twisted underneath her, and she moved it with some difficulty. Painful tingling coursed up the starved appendage once the blood flow was restored, though the sensation wasn't unpleasant. Anwen bit back a scream as the pain changed to a piercing one that threatened to overwhelm her. It was almost like Daphne had thrust a spear into her arm all over again. Sweat trickled down her forehead as the other areas the spear had touched began to burn. She fell against the ground, her entire body shaking, but she refused to scream. In her mind, Daphne laughed. The wounds she'd inflicted on the girl while yet alive were apparently still present.
You'll never be free of those scars,
she cried out with glee.
My blade was blessed by the blood of a revenant. You will suffer from them for the rest of your miserable little life.
Almost vaguely, Anwen recalled sitting on the mountain, just past the endless chasm. Tyler had reached out to examine the throwing knife Courtney had retrieved from the path. Upon touching it, Tyler recoiled as if burned.
This is a mage blade,
he'd said.
It has been infused with the blood of a revenant.
I admit,
Daphne continued.
I was wondering when the pain would return. I was tempted to provoke it myself. Who knew your dreams would do the job for me?
If it hadn't been for the fire coursing through her veins, Anwen would have made some kind of retort. But as things were, she didn't have the strength. It took all she had to not cry out. Knowing it would bring the others running, she knew Tyler would be able to hear, even if no one else could. She wasn't sure why, but knew she didn't want that to happen. Maybe it was kin to admitting defeat, that she couldn't handle it. She wasn't about to prove she was weak. Daphne conjured a spectral stool and sat down.
Oh, go ahead and call them. There's nothing they can do to stop it. After all, the poison's already a part of you. It's just unfortunate the process was stopped before it could obliterate you.
Her phantom eyes blazed with malice.
I remember hearing something about that.
Anwen managed to say through her clenched teeth. The others seemed to have whispered it around her. Something about a ritual of obliteration. She tried to remember what she'd half heard while dreaming, but couldn't. Daphne smirked.
Ah, yes,
she said.
So you did hear a bit about that. Then you know the absolute basics. But Tyler did get a few things wrong. Easy to do when no one survives the whole thing. It doesn't help that only those of the inner circle know how to perform it. And they're not telling anyone.
Anwen froze in shock. The pain momentarily suspended with her surprise.
What? You don't mean?
The phantom mage only smiled, teeth gleaming in the light like a predator stalking its prey.